very wonderful day to you out there. This is the sixth episode in our series of how Chevron is underdeveloping its host communities with particular reference to the IRDC and CICD model. When we talk about development, we are not just talking about infrastructural development. We are not just talking about building of houses. We're not just talking about pipe-borne water and the other infrastructural items. We are also talking about human capacity development. We're also talking about the degree to which the people in the environment have been able to refine their attitude over time. Therefore, when I say that Chevron has in its way underdeveloped the communities vis-a-vis these models of intervention, I mean that if you took the state of affairs as at the time Chevron started operation in these communities and now, and examine the degree of refinement among the people, you will discover that things have deteriorated over the years. The point is that over the years, those who were not as violent, who didn't embrace the language of violence, who didn't embrace violence as a part of life before Chevron came, have seen their numbers increase in the embrace of violence. Now, people no longer believe that pen is mightier than the bullet. That is because essentially the only language that Chevron understands is the language of violence. You can write a million papers, you can do millions of petitions to Chevron. Chevron will not move. But the moment you pick up guns and you seal up their operations, they start speaking to you. And again, there are some people who, in trying to redress the wrongs that Chevron is involved in, go to court of law. And in the course of the proceedings, orders are made. Chevron usually is a party to these proceedings, sees these orders, and disobeys these orders. As a matter of fact, I have said times without number that Chevron obeys orders more in their disobedience than in their obedience. I'll give a couple of examples. In the past 7 years, the CICD initiative has been a subject of litigation, in the course of which there was an specific order made, advising all parties and indeed restraining Chevron from tampering with the benefits and entitlement of the communities. It will surprise you to know that despite that, Chevron still went ahead. Indeed, the matter was still in court. In the course of being in court, Chevron went ahead and even renegotiated the MOU, which was the basis upon which the matter was in court. There are a plethora of situations like this, instances like this. Do we want to talk about the IRDC? In the case of IRDC, Mama Rita, who spearheaded the crusade against the way and manner that the IRDC was being implemented, got an order of court. In the face of that order, Chevron still went ahead. The point is that by the time people see that when they explore civilized means of resolving conflicts, that those means don't work, and they don't work essentially because of the attitudinal indifference and deliberate attempt by Chevron to undermine the process. Chevron would rather engage 50 senior advocates of Nigeria to frustrate the redress of an action than to sit down and amicably resolve it. The multiplier effect of this is that in the psyche of the generations that are emerging, they begin to understand that the only language that works in terms of addressing wrong is the violence approach. And that is why today, the Niger Delta region speaks more in violence than in amicable resolution. But we should not forget that every man who is refined today educated himself, exposed himself to that refinement, because every man is capable of violence. The theory of the state has it that before civilization came, before we decided to have organization, structure, court system, and all the rest, that we were living in a state that the Hobbesians called the state of nature. That in that state of nature, life was short, brutish, and nasty. What that tells us is that by nature, man is violent, man is animalistic. We have had to nurture ourselves to be refined. And it is sad and a thing to be wept for, where an organization that is prided internationally can begin to conduct itself in such a manner as to be encouraging our attitude in the state of nature. So, when I say that Chevron has underdeveloped our communities, I do not expect people to limit themselves to infrastructural development. The most important part of development is human capacity development. Can we say that several years ago, the Niger Delta region, these areas, these host communities, were more peaceful than they are today? No. In almost all the communities, you find rancor. The truth is that if we try to replicate this idea, this fine idea I'm making in private life, imagine that a man goes to the village and picks up a driver who is hardly able to read and write and hardly able to speak. If that driver stays and works with the man in the city for 10 years, that driver ought to be more refined if the man who engaged the driver is really a leader. In other words, is really refined himself. And when we look at the man, if the man becomes more of a nature person, that is more, if he becomes rougher than he was 10 years after, the person to blame is his employer. We have known of very noble men who brought people from the village and transformed their lives. And that is what happens when a person who is a leader meets with a person who is not a leader. In my previous shot, I had said that Chevron has the advantage of having a cream of well-selected intellectuals. If you have a third class, you can't work in Chevron. There is a bar. And even if you have a second-class upper, you don't necessarily qualify to work in Chevron. You have to pass certain exams. And after passing those exams, you are passed to training and continuous training. Part of the training that Chevron gives to a team of staff is the training of how to have better impact on their social environment. It will be a disgrace if after more than 40 years of operation, you look at the communities in which you are operating, the only thing you see is rancor and acrimony. You are a bad apostle. And that is the point. Let us not just look at infrastructure. Let us look at the human component. As we go on, we'll take this one after the other. A wonderful afternoon to you, and God bless you.